So the deck we're going to talk about today is Harpy Ladies. Harpy Ladies is a new deck that has been performing very, very well. A lot of the Japanese topping lists have been Harpy Lady lists recently, and it's not too difficult to see why. The deck can be very, very strong. The major flaw of this deck tends to be that the big boss monsters tend to cap out around 2100 attack. Now, there are ways to circumvent this. For example, Harpy Ladies in the middle piece can boost its own attack by 500, or boost any monster's attack on the field by 500, which is pretty good. That means it can hit 26, it can make your other monsters hit 26, which is decent. Harpy Lady 1 gives a 300 point boost to all wind monsters, so they become 24. 24 obviously is still under 25, which does kinda suck, but again, you also have other cards that can get you over there, like Triangle Ecstasy Spark, which gives 600 attack to all of your monsters, which again is going to put your guys up to 27 before any other effects are involved. And you also have the equip spell in Harpy's Full Dress, which gives 800 attacks. There are a decent amount of ways to get them over that 2500 threshold, but if you don't see them, if you get a little bit unlucky, you can kind of get stuck at 21 and just feel like you can't really push and do anything big. Obviously, you still have the maximum you can fall back on, which has 3400 attack, but this is a deck that includes a maximum, where the main cards in the deck are maximum cards, but you don't actually summon the maximum that often. Now, I'm not saying you never summon it, because sometimes you can just win the game. If you get out the maximum, get a full dress on it, that can just be game right there. But a lot of the time, this deck will just kind of want to be swarming the board with a bunch of the pieces instead of the actual maximum itself. So going through the card by card, we have 3 vanilla Harpy Ladies, and the main reason we are on the vanilla version of this card is for Harpy's Regina. So if you have a face-up wind attribute winged beast type monster on your field, send one card from your hand to the graveyard, draw 1 card. Then if you have a face-up normal monster on your field, you can add 1 Harpy Lady or Harpy Ladies from your graveyard to your hand. So if we get a Harpy Lady out, we can use Regina to return a Harpy Lady from our graveyard, which again, Harpy Lady 1 and Harpy Lady 3 count as Harpy Lady in the graveyard, or our Harpy Ladies, which is any of our maximum pieces, which can be good to assemble our maximum or just to gain advantage in general and just keep being able to swarm the board as hard as we can. For our legend, we're on Riser. Riser is a very, very versatile card. It's very, very powerful. It's basically better than Zaborg almost all the time. The one drawback this card has is that it's level 6. And level 6 is kind of a problem because there is this one little card in the meta called Mad Rare Aquila, which can just destroy it. So just being able to pop it, gain the 600 attack, can be catastrophic if it happens at the wrong time. That's the only reason I don't like Riser. In this deck specifically, it is a winged beast, so it does work with a lot of the rest of the stuff we're doing. It's wind, so it'll gain the boost off of Harpy Lady 1, and we can send it to the grave for something like Icarus Attack, which is really, really good. So Harpy Ladies L. This is a pretty cool card, 2100 attack, and its name becomes Harpy Ladies, and it cannot be destroyed by your opponent's trap effects. Being immune to trap effects is really, really cool. That means this thing can't be destroyed by Mirror Force, which a lot of people are starting to pivot onto Mirror Force and Torrential Tribute, so this card can be immune to them. It's not going to come up too often, but it can be really, really important. Next up, Harpy Ladies Middle. So again, we can shuffle 2 wind attribute winged beast type monsters from our graveyard into the deck. 1 face-up monster on your field gains 500 attack. So, you know, that's pretty decent. 500 attack is always going to be relevant. Get you over to that 26. It can get something else like Riser up to 29. So it's just a really, really good effect, and this is probably going to be the one you're using the most. And next up, Harpy Ladies R. So this card cannot be destroyed by monster effects, which is... sometimes this can be really useful. A lot of the time it's not going to be super useful. This is mostly used when it's in maximum mode to stop it from getting popped by something like Zaborg, but now that Riser exists, it's a little bit shakier. But being able to be immune to monster effects is something you'd rather have than not have, I suppose, so it's still pretty good. Next up, Harpy Lady 1. Just being able to boost all wind monsters by 300 attack is bonkers. This card is a 1600 attack monster, which is really, really good, especially when it's given to like Harpies, and it can also boost the attack of all your other Harpies. If you get out 3 of this card, each of them are gaining 900 attack, which means they each become 22, which is not bad. It's not great, but it's not terrible. It's decent, right? Especially with no tributes. Next up, Harpy Lady 3. So this card can often be the MVP of the deck. So send the top card of your deck to the graveyard. Again, this deck doesn't do a lot of milling, so having any is useful. This card's name becomes Harpy Lady until the end of your opponent's next turn, which can be relevant for some of the effects. And then you can choose 1 face-up level 8 or lower monster on your opponent's field, and if your opponent cannot attack with that monster during their next turn. So this is really, really good against a lot of decks. Just being able to stall your opponent so that they cannot clear your entire board, or so that their one big monster can't attack, can be really, really strong. Regina, obviously this is our filtering and gaining advantage card depending on how the board's set up, and is just basically a really important tool for the deck. And then next up we have Trick Pigeon. So we can send a spell or trap from our hand to the graveyard, add a winged beast type monster with 1500 or more attack from your graveyard to your hand. So this card is a little bit limited in its application because we can only add winged beast type monster with 1500 or more attack. So that basically limits it to our Harpy Ladies and our Rise of the Storm Monarch. So we can't just bring back anything we want, but having the option to just pitch any of our spell traps to bring any of these cards back can be really, really strong. This lets us complete our maximum if we're trying to do that. It can get back Harpy Ladies if we need the extra oomph, or it can bring back Riser if we just want the Riser effect, because Riser's effect is ridiculous. So of course we want to keep using that. And then we're on just the one copy of Harpy Kala. So this card just lets us set a Harpy's Full Dress from our graveyard to our spell trap zone. We're only on the one copy of this card because we're not planning to see Harpy's Full Dress the entire time. This isn't our main battle plan, but being able to recycle this can be really good. That means we can send it to grave with something like Trick Pigeon and then bring it back with Kala. So for our Legend spell, we're on Dark Hole, just the best Legend spell. Being able to just deal with any problematic threats is always going to be really, really powerful. Dark Hole is just a really, really strong card right now, and there's a reason it's the most played Legend spell. Next up, Triangle Ecstasy Spark. So if we have Harpy Ladies face up on our field, so it can't be Harpy Lady, has to be Harpy Ladies, so we need one of our maximum pieces at the very least. Up to 3 face-up wind attribute monsters on your field gain 600 attack to the end of this turn, and this turn your opponent cannot activate trap cards. So this is bonkers. This basically says your opponent cannot use Mirror Force, they can't use Magic Cylinder, they can't use Battle Demotion, they can't use Dark Liberation, they can't use anything. So it's so powerful, as well as a 600 boost. And obviously this deck is lacking in attack points, so that 600 really matters a lot in this deck. Next up, we're on 2 copies of Elegant Egotist. So if we have Harpy Lady or Harpy Ladies face up on our field, we can special summon up to 2 Harpy Lady and or Harpy Ladies from our graveyard face up to our field. This turn we cannot declare an attack on attack position monsters with 1200 or less attack. So, swarming the board, get out 2 extra monsters, really, really powerful effect. The limitation on this card is if your opponent has left a weak monster, that kind of stops us from getting at them, it stops us from clearing their entire board, and sometimes it will stop us from actually winning the game, so you have to be careful about that. Skilled players might play around this card, but a lot of the time, you'll probably be in a situation where it's like, well, I could use Elegant Egotist, or I could just play defensive, set Elegant Egotist on the board, and then use it on a later turn when I'm trying to like push for game. So it's a bit of a tricky one, but we're running it at 2 because we want to be seeing this a lot of the time, and a lot of the time this card combined with our Triangle Ecstasy Spark will be how we win games. Harpy's Full Dress, monster gains 800 attack and 400 defense. Also, if you have 1 or 3 monsters on your field, the equipped monster inflicts piercing damage. So it's decent. 800 attack is really good, especially in a deck that lacks attack points. And that piercing can be super relevant, especially if we're in maximum mode because of the extra effect of Harpy Lady R, which is it can make up to 3 attacks on monsters each turn. So we get a boost which will put us up to 42, then using Harpy Lady's effect, we'll gain an extra 500, which will put us up to 47, and then we get 3 attacks with 3 lots of piercing, which is really, really good, and a lot of the time we'll just OTK our opponent, so we always want to have that in the back pocket, even if it's not our primary game plan, it will come up enough. Next up, the best trap card for the type is Bruku-Hearted Pigeon. So, this is an old trap card for the Trapigeon deck, but it works unbelievably well in Harpy Ladies. So when your opponent normal or special summons a level 5 or higher monster face up, or you have a face up winged beast type monster on your field, change 1 attack position monster on your opponent's field to face up defense position. Then if you change the monster defense position by this effect, inflict 500 damage. But the 500 damage doesn't really matter. The rest of this effect is bonkers because it specifies normal or special summon, which means we can use this in response to our opponent trying to kill us with, let's say, 7's Wonder Fusion. If they activate 7's Wonder Fusion, a lot of the time people will play around things like word working by just dropping 7's Wonder Fusion as the first thing they do on the turn. The card has to resolve, summoning out the monster, and then you can't word working them, for example. If your opponent does that into our Bruku-Hearted Pigeon, or as its old name, Heartbreak Look, then they're like 7's Geas will just get changed into defense mode and then won't get to attack us. So it's a really, really powerful card that can stop a lot of very problematic things. This will also stop like a power bonded Cyber Twin or Cyber End. This card is just, right now in the meta, a lot of decks want to just summon out a big thing and try and kill you, and this card immediately stops that, as well as it just stops decks that play low to the ground as well. Like Sea Serpent midrange will summon out there like Apsaris, try to kill you with that, and then you can just use this to change the defense, attack over it next turn. And although it's not going to be as useful there, it's still really, really good to outgrind them. And this card is, I cannot overstate how good this trap card is. This is unbelievably good. We're only running 2 because, again, we're trying to play around something like Sea Dragon Knight. We don't want to have multiple copies of trap cards on our graveyard if we can help it, but this card is too good to run at 1, in my opinion. Next up, Scat Thief, just a fantastic trap card. fixes our hand. If we've already got a lot of cards in our hand, we can start the turn with a lot of extra cards. So for example, if we end our turn with 5 cards in hand, we can use Scat Thief to draw 3, discard 1, then we'll draw for turn. We'll just get to have a turn with 8 cards in hand, which can basically be full combo a lot of the time. And it can also protect us from dying to level 8 and lower monsters, which can be really, really good. Dragon Lion Pit Trap. So this deck plays a lot of level 5 monsters in all of our Harpy Ladies and Rise of the Storm Monarch, which means we can use this trap. And this trap, again, is really good into a lot of those same decks that want to try and like pop all of our stuff, as well as a lot of the time decks that play Dragon Lion are in a bit of a weird situation where they're like, well, I can't summon 2 level 8 monsters, for example, because I could sacrifice one of them for this card and then Dragon Lion will pop my other level 8 monster. But because we're only on level 5s, if your opponent summons anything that's bigger than 5, we don't have to worry about that. Dragon Lion Pit Trap will just blow up all their cards and we don't have to kind of play around our own trap card, which means it is extra value in here. Just being able to, again, stop things like 7's Wonder Fusion, be able to stop the Cyber Dragons, and have a good matchup into most other decks like Sea Serpent Max. This card is just really, really good in this deck. So next up, Harpies Feathered Tempest. This card's a little bit weaker, but still decent. So when your opponent normal summons a monster, so again, only normal summon, which is, it's the problem. The other 2 trap cards we have, the Bruku Hearted Pigeon and the Dragon Lion, is normal or special summon. This card is only normal, so it is very limited in how you can use it. But we can shuffle 2 Harpy Ladies and or Harpy Lady from our graveyard into the deck, destroy that summoned monster. So rather than changing it to defense mode like Bruku Hearted Pigeon, this actually destroys the monster, which is pretty decent. And if we shuffled a normal monster into our deck, so again, that's why we're on the Harpy Lady, we can change the battle position of one face-up monster from your opponent's side of the field. So if your opponent did summon a monster and then summoned out a second monster, we can destroy the newly summoned monster and change the other monster to defense, which can be really good. Being able to stop 2 monsters with this card is the main reason we're on it, and because, again, we want to be on a lot of trap cards, because just being able to play a lot of traps right now in the meta seems very good, because there's a lot of, like, OTK decks. Like, those decks might not want to be using a lot of trap cards, but the other decks that don't do that so much definitely want to have a lot of trap cards to protect themselves. So Harpies Feather Tempest, really, really good. And finally, Magic Cylinder. This card is amazing. Magic Cylinder is completely bonkers. Now, you could happily swap this for Icarus Attack or Torrential Tribute or Mirror Force, but Magic Cylinder a lot of the time will just steal games. Being able to hit people that are playing like the big chunky decks, the Cyber Dragons, the 7's Wonders, is huge, and being able to threaten that as well will make them not want to commit until they can blow up all of your back row, which is making this card really, really, really powerful. Obviously, you can play Icarus Attack as well, because Icarus Attack is also unbelievably strong. This is kind of like a slightly better Torrential Tribute a lot of the time, because we can pop one of our Winged Beasts and then pop any 2 cards on the field. So Torrential Tribute would nuke our entire field and our opponent's field, but losing our entire field kind of sucks. If we get 3 monsters out and we have Icarus Attack, we can get rid of just one of our cards and then take 2 of our opponent's monsters, which is almost their entire field. So I personally think Icarus Attack is better than Torrential Tribute, and it can also pop back row or field spells if you really need to, so it's a lot more versatile as well. But for the main, we're going Cylinder because I think it's better more of the time. So for the side deck, we're on Harpy Lady 2. This card is probably not getting sided in very often, but it can be useful. Its name is Harpy Lady while in the graveyard, so if we just feel like we need extra kind of names, if our opponent's doing a lot of grave hate, we might bring this in, and it stops your opponent from activating trap cards when it declares an attack, which is not going to come up too often, let's be honest. I don't know who's activating a trap card to stop a 1300 attack monster, but yeah, you never know. We also have 3 Mad Rare Aquila. This is in here. We could have put this in the main deck, but I feel like the deck doesn't necessarily need it. It's also not a wind monster, so it loses a lot of synergy with the deck, and we kind of like the deck feeling like a bit of a well-oiled machine. But this card is still a must to be in at least the side deck, because it deals with Execute, it deals with any level 6 monster your opponent might have, and it does let us get aggressive by being able to attack twice, so I would always have this in the side deck at the very least. We're on 3 Avian Spells Strategy and 3 Ghost Cyclone. So after game 1, a lot of people are going to side in Prison Island, Cell Block 5 and 6. And so when they do that, we want a way to be able to deal with it. And the way that we are deciding to do that is with all of our spell trap hate. So especially if we win the first game, we'll then side in our Ghost Cyclones and possibly 1 Avian spell strategy. I think we're only bringing in Ghost Cyclone if we're going second, or if if we've lost, so we're assuming we're going second. and if not, we'll bring in the even spell strategies, and that is just to make sure that we don't get blown out by this kind of annoying floodgate. But I do understand why people are on this, because the Harpy deck can be quite oppressive, and if we do get this out, a lot of our maximum pieces now become bricks in our hand. So what we can do is maybe side some of these out as well, like maybe just one copy of L, one copy of R, bring in maybe a few Aquillas, and then just to kind of extra play around Prison Island, just so that we don't just hard lose to it when it does come out. Then we have Heavy Storm, similar reason to the other cards, and also if our opponent is on a particularly trap-heavy deck, we don't need it necessarily to go for the win because we have Triangle Ecstasy Spark, but it can't hurt to have extra Spell Trap hate if we need it. Word working in here, obviously, for the specific matchups. This is specifically going to be used against the 7/1 Diffusion, but this card is basically pretty good into everything. Everyone has cards in their graveyards right now that they want to stay there. Cyber Dragons want Cyber Dragon to stay in their graveyard, so it's always there for Processor. Sea Serpents always want to have cards in their graveyard to use for some of their effects. Wind Warriors now need to keep their Wind Warriors in their graveyard so they can keep using their dance to keep doing their fusion summons. It just feels like every deck right now does want to keep cards in their graveyard, so we could even bring this into the main deck, and I've seen a lot of people start doing that, but for now we're going to leave it on the side. We've got a second Dragon Line Pit Trap in case, again, if OTK decks are really becoming a problem, then we really need more ways to stop getting OTK'd, and Dragon Line is a way to do that, and the same with Icarus Attack. So we can just use our Icarus Attack. We can use this, especially if our opponent's on Pitch Black or Mirage Dragon, we'll bring this in, which can just be really, really powerful. So this is the deck. It's a good deck. It's very fun to play, and it can be really strong. It also doesn't play any level 7 or higher, which means it plays around things like XQT, and it plays quite well around 7's Geas, which is kind of forcing a lot of the 7/1 Diffusion players to fall back onto Paladin and Chariot, which is obviously not what they want to do, because a lot of 7's Fusion players just want to summon out 7's Geas, boost it, and then just attack twice for game, so it can mess up that strategy quite a lot. Again, the weakness of the deck is that it's kind of weak in terms of attack points. 2100 is not a lot, so if you end up bricking, if you don't find a lot of the attack boosting cards, you can just kind of be like, well, I can't play the game, I just have to play everything in defense mode and everything just dies quickly. But provided that doesn't happen, the deck is really, really strong. So let's fire in some replays, and I can show you what I'm talking about.